Hi again, it's Dr. Amy Salerno, also known as Doctora Latina, or in English, Draw Latina. This is part 2 of discussion on parenting the college-aged child. Specifically, I am going to discuss a bit about the college and university culture on campuses in the United States as well as Canada, but mostly the United States. I think it's an important discussion to have because a lot of what has been looked at in the murders of the Idaho 4 University of Idaho college students has been focused upon their connection to their sororities and or fraternities, the on-life campus that they had, as well as the off-campus lifestyle that they enjoyed while being members of the University of Idaho community. A lot of people I've noticed in the chats in the true crime community have probably not heard of, or maybe they're from overseas and are unfamiliar with what is the Greek system, what is a fraternity or a sorority. So I want to give a quick backdrop on the history of fraternities and sororities in the United States. Really began, frankly, in the late 1700s of all things. The first fraternity was, I believe, Phi Beta Kappa, which was initially a social fraternity for men on the campus of William and Mary College in, I believe it's in Virginia. And that fraternity ultimately morphed and continues today as an academic, scholarly fraternity for the very high powered and high achieving college students, and they get elected to Phi Beta Kappa. There are many, many, many fraternities and sororities, and I'm not going to go through the whole life cycle from the 1700s to the present, but I do want to mention that there are 5 sort of high points or common themes amongst fraternities and sororities. And then the 5 elements that are common to them, there is their secrecy, that they are single-sex organizations, so fraternities are for men and sororities for women, that selection of new members goes through a 2-part vetting process known as rushing and pledging, and it can become a very complex process, and it can take from 6 to 12 weeks in some cases while people are going through the process of being vetted by members of a particular fraternity or sorority. With respect to sororities, they're given bids, and I remember from when I went to college, the sororities did not have sorority houses on campus. The fraternities did. The classmates of mine or dorm members of mine that received bids would receive them underneath our door with handmade little invitations, and so people would receive a bid from 1, 2, 3 or more sororities, and then there would be a period of time where the sororities would sort of try to woo new members. Back when I went, and that was 30 years ago, to university, I was not offered a bid, and that was very normal or de rigueur because the sororities were either all white, Anglo, we say, sort of blonde hair, blue-eyed, or black. So if you had any ethnicity other than Anglo, I think maybe only one of my acquaintances was offered a bid, but it was generally known that if you were Italian, Spanish, Jewish, Asian Indian, you were not, or Asian, you were not offered a bid for a sorority. So there is historically a sense of elitism, racism, although that has changed a lot in the past 15, 20 years, and now there are what are known as multicultural Greek sororities and fraternities that offer invitation to people who are not either Caucasian, or Black. So that is something for everybody to sort of understand when looking at the subculture of the Greek life, the fraternities and sororities in the Idaho 4 case. Now, at the University of Idaho, they have a total number in 2022 of 11,507 students. They offer, per their website, quote, nationally competitive programs at Idaho prices. There are 34 chapters of sororities and fraternities at the University of Idaho. In more than 20% of students at the University of Idaho belong to a fraternity or a sorority. So that's a lot, but not a majority of students. Things that are really important to understand, in my opinion, about fraternities and sororities on all campuses. My children, one is still in college and one just completed college, is that if a campus does have a Greek system, and something like 650 Canadian and United States college campuses do have that present on their campus, it can be something that sort of drives or propels social life. For members of the sorority or the fraternity, I'll speak with respect to sorority, it can take, during the rush period of 6 to 12 weeks, when they're trying to vet somebody that's a potential sorority sister, it can take up to 40 hours a week outside of your academics to give time to the sorority. Once you're a member, people say it's between 10 to 20 hours minimum commitment a week in a sorority, a lot of which goes to meetings, philanthropic activities, and probably per the reading and per the experience that I witnessed on my college campus and what my children have witnessed, and my patients, a lot of drama. But it can be a positive thing, and it is something that is very controversial in amongst members of the United States population. But for folks that sort of buy into that concept of being a member of a fraternity or sorority, it can apparently be a very positive thing. For instance, I myself have known people who've been members of fraternities that I went to college with, and they were able to land a phenomenal job because they were a member of X fraternity, and their graduate members were able to shepherd them into coveted employment positions. Once you are a member of a fraternity or a sorority undergraduate, you can make dues payments and be a lifetime member over your lifespan, and it can actually offer an opportunity for socialization, for philanthropy. Most of these, from what I've read, I didn't know this, but most of these sororities and fraternities actually are considered tax-exempt 501c organizations, which is, that's pretty amazing. So the cost of being a member is, frankly, something that I would never have been able to have afforded, and wouldn't if my children had been invited to become a member of a sorority. As far as I was concerned, they would be on their own financially for that. At the University of Idaho, the Pan Hellenic organization, which is for the sororities, it's a national sort of umbrella organization for sororities. The dues for sorority members at the University of Idaho, $3,800 to $4,500 per semester. For the fraternities, it's $3,500 per semester. Now, in 1998, there was an organization founded called the Multicultural Greek Council. So, in 1998, there was founded a new Multicultural Greek Council, which offered a variety of new sorority type, fraternity type opportunities for folks of different cultural backgrounds, and for the goal of offering not only multicultural opportunities to be invited and participate in college sorority and fraternities, but also the opportunity to do more philanthropy and just charitable work. I've had many patients who've participated in multicultural groups on campus through the Multicultural Greek Council and have had fabulous opportunities. Ironically, for the Multicultural, or MCG, Multicultural Council, MGC, Multicultural Greek Council, it at the University of Idaho only costs $300 per semester. So fraternities and sororities are between $3,500 and $4,500 per semester, whereas the Multicultural Greek Council organizations are only $300 per semester at the University of Idaho. Now, there historically has been quite a bit of criticism in, as I've mentioned, in terms of issues around sexism, misogyny, binge drinking, drugs sometimes, but certainly binge alcohol drinking in fraternities in particular. There was one Harvard University study looking at, across many, many campuses, what is the rate of binge alcohol drinking, and it was found that folks that are members of Greek organizations, that 4 out of 5, or 80%, admitted to binge drinking on campus or binge drinking habits, whereas folks that were not participating in fraternities and sororities, the Harvard study showed only 20% were found to be binge drinkers. And that is a huge, huge finding, especially for me as a physician, seeing the effects of alcohol and drugs on my patient population. 2 quick things I wanted to mention, and then we'll call it a day on this. One is that I've noticed in a lot of the police video cameras, etc., that there were young men, some of whom said that they were in fraternities, who would come to the door of 1122 at the time of the noise complaints. And I read from several sorority members online, but also having spoken to patients of mine and my daughters, that apparently it is very common, de rigueur, for each sorority to identify what sort of like a handler, 1 or 2 young men in their brother fraternity who will handle issues around public safety, police officers coming and looking into issues around behaviors, noise complaints, etc. According to my daughter, for instance, who is not in a sorority, but she was invited a couple of times to fraternity parties and had difficulty getting in because of her cultural background. But she did say that it was very typical for there to be somebody at the door who was assigned, and that person would be 21 years of age or older. These guys would act as screeners for people to be invited into the parties, and also in case there were complaints from public safety or police. So I do think it's very interesting, and it bears looking into more deeply as to some of the behaviors, including the issues around secrecy that members of fraternities and sororities take oaths around, secret handshakes, secret traditions and rituals. I know of a patient who said that she had gone to a fraternity party. A friend of hers who was a fraternity member apparently became very intoxicated and ill. She took him back to his room, and she didn't want him to fall asleep because she was afraid that he might aspirate vomitus. So she kept watch over him. And she said about an hour or so after she brought the young man back to his room and was watching over him, there were two fraternity handlers that arrived and asked her get out. They basically told her to get out, but they wanted to know what the younger fraternity member had told her, what secrets, what he, in his inebriated state, had he divulged anything to her. And she was flabbergasted and said, I don't even know what you're talking about. What do you mean a secret? And they pressured her a bit, and she said, ultimately, I don't even know what you're talking about. There were no secrets. The only secret is that we have to keep him safe. And they asked her to leave, and she said, I'll leave if you can promise that you will keep him, and you're not just going to leave, but that you'll keep your eye on him so he doesn't aspirate. So this, to me, was concerning, that, and I hear this from quite a number of my patients quite often, that there are issues around secrecy. There are issues around binge drinking, drugging, and even apparently drug dealing within fraternities on campuses. I don't know what of that was going on at the fraternities at the University of Idaho. I have no idea. I'm talking in generalities. Now, sororities through the Pan Hellenic Association are not allowed by Pan Hellenic laws to, if they have a sorority house, they cannot have alcohol, not even a sip. They are not allowed to sponsor any parties in a sorority house. These are national Pan Hellenic rules. So that means that their senior year or maybe their junior year, if they're allowed by the sorority, they may move off campus, at which time they can, I imagine, throw parties. So it's really interesting to me that the 1122 house was known as a, quote, party house, and the police that came said, oh, this is an off-campus sorority house. By Pan Hellenic law, the sororities don't have off-campus houses that are officially affiliated with the sorority because partying wouldn't be allowed. But I imagine 1122 was an unofficial, unaffiliated sorority house. If you want more real granular specifics about the situation at 1122 and the members of the household at 1122 at the University of Idaho, I would really urge people to go to Truth and Transparency, Lana Oriani. She's fabulous. I've followed her for years. She is a stickler to detail and really a brilliant mind and a keen investigative reporter on social media. And I'm going to link yesterday's live where Lana Oriani from Truth and Transparency takes a deep dive and gets very granular on the specific living situation and the different sort of dynamics of different members of that household vis-a-vis their sororities prior to the murders. And on that note, I'm going to say so long. I hope you found some of this helpful to understand the subculture of the Greek system on campuses in the United States. I wonder myself how much academics actually gets done at some of these schools. So I know where I went to college, a lot of academics got done, and folks that were in fraternities and sororities, and it was a pretty big part of Duke University where I went to college, undergrad. It was a pretty big Greek type of life there, but it really did not eclipse the academics because the academics were so rigorous. And I remember one of my professors saying, the goal at Duke is to study 85% of the time and make sure you have 15% of your time for fun. And I seem to have seen that with many of my friends, both who participated in fraternities and sororities and who did not. At the University of Idaho, I don't know how that works. What portion of the day is spent studying and what portion of the day in the week is spent partying? I don't know the answer to that. But I think it's important to learn about Greek organizations and to understand the specifics about what I've shared with you today so that we can understand some of the dynamics of the relationships amongst the house members and amongst their friends that were off campus and on campus in the fraternity sorority subculture at the University of Idaho. And on that note, my friends, I'm going to say goodbye. Adios, mis amigos. Go forward with courage. Avanti con coraggio.